Ahead and get started. So thank you again for joining us. This is the Let's Talk About Brain Health webinar with Audette Rackley, and I am Jen Torgerson from RiverWoods in the Manchester campus. We're glad to have you here with us today. A few reminders before we get started. You are on mute. We cannot see or hear you, but we do welcome your questions. So please feel free to type any questions you have throughout the presentation into our Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, or perhaps at the top of your screen, depending on what you're joining us from. We do appreciate your suggestions on how to make improvements, and we love to have new ideas for future topics. So we welcome your ideas. Many of you are waitlisted with RiverWoods communities or have toured RiverWoods communities, but some of you are new to RiverWoods and don't know much about us. So just a real quick highlight of what a CCRC is, which is a continuing care retirement community. We are an insurance contract or insurance product, and one of 1,900 approximately of these CCRCs around the country. Our contracts are regulated by the state of operation, in our case, the New Hampshire Department of Insurance. Our financial performance is reported to the state annually, and our contract is approved by the state annually. Essentially, you are prepaying and insuring for future care needs for assisted living, memory support, nursing, or long-term care needs. And a portion of our entrance fee and a portion of our monthly fees are tax deductible, because our contract is considered prepaying for future care. So it's a prepaid medical expense. It is also a lifestyle choice. So you enter when you're living independently before you need assistance while you're still active. You will be free from home maintenance chores. So we take on the workload and allow all the fun stuff up to you. Our monthly fees include pre-scheduled transportation, if you need it, to medical and dental appointments and outings, day trips, things like that. You have a full calendar, many resident-driven activities, programs every month, every day, educational programs, concerts, lectures, socials, volunteer opportunities. You name it, and there's so much going on. It's hard to describe it all, but it's a wonderful lifestyle choice with more engagement than typically people would receive at home alone. And it allows you to stay in control of your life. It lets you choose where you will receive care in the future, what the quality of that care will be, what the costs will be in the future, and who will care for you. And having that ability to choose is everything that we provide here, and answers so many questions at a point where people often stop planning. So those who choose a CCRC are really planning for the future and making a smart financial decision and a really smart healthcare decision as well. So RiverWoods today, for those of you who don't know much about us, we are 3 communities. RiverWoods Exeter was started by 2 women around a kitchen table over 30 years ago, and they created the Woods campus. That was followed up with the Ridge campus and the Boulders campus. So 3 campuses at RiverWoods Exeter. RiverWoods Manchester started as an affiliation with what was Birch Hill and then became a full RiverWoods community. And RiverWoods Durham was the most recent addition and was new construction, so a new build. The 3 campuses share a mission and share a CCRC board. The board focuses on community operations. It's a volunteer board. And then there's the RiverWoods Group, which is acting as the parent company. It's a system board, volunteer board also, that's more focused on mission and future growth. So the RiverWoods Group provides professional fee-based services to each community. They've consolidated all the services from what was on the different communities to the RiverWoods Group, such as finance, IT, human resources, marketing, and quality. The RiverWoods Group takes on the risk of any future projects at the communities and any new ventures. And the communities are financially independent from each other, and each has an annual opportunity based on asset availability to provide additional funding for additional projects or ventures. Today, I would like to introduce Audette Rackley, joining us from Dallas, Texas. Audette is the Assistant Director of Strength-Based Programs at the Center for Brain Health, who focuses on impacting the broader Alzheimer's community via online delivery of brain health strength-based program for early Alzheimer's. A member of the brain health team since the center's inception in 1999, Audette's research has focused on optimizing function during Alzheimer's disease, mild cognitive impairment, and healthy aging. Audette, welcome, and I'm going to go ahead and pass this on to you.
Thank you, Jen. And it is so exciting to be here. I really appreciate the invitation, and I'm so impressed with the interaction that I've had with the RiverWoods team and just their professionalism in getting this talk off and running. So thank you for having me. And I don't know how many of you do math in your head, but Center for Brain Health started in 1999. So that means we're celebrating our 25th year. So this has been an exciting year for us. And I'm going to be talking about, something that has been evolving here at the Center for Brain Health over those 25 years, because as our name communicates, that's what we're interested in. We're interested in helping people pay attention to their brain health and really to do it in practical ways. And so today I hope to set a framework for you in terms of maybe looking at brain health a little differently than you have. I'm going to start with some research studies that I think point to the value of giving a focus to brain health. But then we'll also talk about some strategies. So my hope is that by the end of the day, you will have some specific things in mind that you think would be a helpful thing to start creating a habit that could further enhance or optimize your brain health. But the first thing I think we need to start with is to really have a definition of brain health, because I think if I threw that out to the crowd, there may be a lot of different ideas on how you define brain health. And what I would kind of like to communicate, and something that comes up a lot, is that brain health is more than memory. It's more than IQ. It's not about how smart you are. It's not about how fast you can process information. And it's not just defined by absence of disease. Brain health is much broader than that. And at the Center for Brain Health, we define brain health as making the most of the brain's ability to thrive in life. And just as we pay attention to things like physical health, we think it's important to pay attention to brain health. And so I'll be talking about, what's your brain health plan? But we know that, even in the midst of emotional challenges or any injury, or even something like Alzheimer's and stress levels, many things can affect brain function. But what we do in the midst of those challenge points can make a difference in terms of how we function and how we navigate forward. And I'm going to start in maybe a place you hadn't thought about, since we're talking about healthy aging. But since my focus is Alzheimer's, and I've been at the center since 1999, and my perspective over that time, I've really kind of seen the evolution of how we're approaching brain health. And because I know, 25 years ago, the focus in Alzheimer's in terms of intervening and trying to figure out how to help people with that diagnosis actually didn't happen until after the diagnosis. And this study that I kind of have a snapshot of on the screen was a study that we published in 2004. And it was a randomized study, and we were interested to see what the impact of a strength-based intervention would be on individuals who were in the early stages of Alzheimer's. And so the study, as I said, it's randomized, and they put people into one or two groups. One was medication alone, and at that time it was donepezil or Aricept. That was the most commonly prescribed medication at that time. And then the second group, which was our treatment group, was that was where people had what we call strength-based intervention. So doing things that tap intact abilities, not just those things that are impaired. So we know that short-term memory is hard. We tap long-term memory. We engage them in conversations about their wisdom and opinions. I even had them share a life interest. So someone might come who had decorated cakes and she brought a cake and then we ate it. You know, she talked about what she did, or it could be a jewelry maker, anything that they did in life. So we tapped things that were very salient and meaningful to them because we knew that that would engage them at their highest level. And after a year, in comparing the data between the control group and the intervention group, what we found is that the people with Alzheimer's who were in the cognitive stimulation group had a slower rate of functional decline. So that's their ability to continue to perform daily activities. They had less participant reported or less irritability and apathy as reported by their caregiver. And they had a greater participant reported quality of life. So in a diagnosis where you would expect decline over time, the fact that we could slow that or change the slope and slow the change is a very positive thing in terms of the impact of a cognitive engagement and emotional well-being. And so at that time, so 25 years ago, we didn't start until a person had dementia. But what I've noticed over the years is that we realized that we couldn't, you know, even though we had a positive impact, you know, in combination with medication, nothing was being done to help stop or slow the changes. And so the focus on research actually kind of shifted back. We zoomed out and thought, what if we dealt with mild cognitive impairment? So that was kind of the next stage before a person gets dementia. And for those of you who may not be familiar with the term, mild cognitive impairment is generally, you know, thought of as that phase between normal aging, which is this yellow part of the slide, and dementia. So this does not mean that everyone goes on to get dementia. It doesn't mean that at all. This is just the continuum for dementia. So even people with MCI, not everyone goes on to get dementia. But for those who get dementia, they do pass through this stage called mild cognitive impairment. And so MCI is when someone is maybe having more difficulty than their peers, but they're still functioning independently. And the difference is that people with dementia just need more support. So the reason that we wanted to focus on MCI is, okay, they're at a higher level. Can we do things that, you know, we want to see, can we do things that can further kind of help their build that resilience and kind of slow change down. But one of the things, before I go on, hopefully you saw this rating sheet on the link that you got in the emails. Because if you haven't done this, I would love you to give some thought to this, because we're going to come back to it later. Because one of the things that we've learned is the value of or kind of understanding some risk factors for cognitive decline. So I just want you to think of, from a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the best, how are you in terms of managing these different areas of life? How's your diet? How's your physical exercise? How's your social connection? So 10 being the highest, 1 being the lowest, and we'll come back to that in a moment. But first, I think it's important that we realize some things about risk factors. And one is that there are some things we can't control. So that would be things like our family history and genetics. And so that's something that we really can't change. But there are many things that we can control. And so when we talk about lifestyle factors, that's really what we're focused on, are those things that we can change. But I think one area that we often overlook, which is very powerful, is to really give thought to our mindset. Because I think there are some who are convinced we can make a difference, but there are some who may be marginally convinced that lifestyle changes can make a difference. But research is showing that there are many things that we can do to promote good brain function. And one of the things in terms of mindset that I'll be returning to later is thinking about how we approach challenge points or situations from a standpoint of kind of the fixed versus the growth mindset. And I would expect most people here have heard about the growth mindset, but that just means something about possibility thinking. So whereas fixed mindset might just kind of stay with the status quo, a growth mindset would think in terms of possibilities. So what if? Why don't I give it a try? That sort of thing. So, you know, even if you're good at something, a growth mindset might say, how could I get better? So instead of thinking, this may be too late to start, I'm too old, a growth mindset would say, what have I got to lose? What if my actions actually make a difference? I'm willing to give it a try. So that's what I'm hoping, no matter where you are on that continuum. I'm sure there's some in the audience that are already in that growth mindset stage. And I hope those of you who may be less likely to think about that would maybe consider some ways that you could apply a growth mindset to something in your own life. Another study that I want to share with you was published in Lancet Neurology. And I think this gives some more strength to why this focus on brain health is so apparent. Because this study was actually done quite a bit earlier. This was a revised study. But what they did is they went retrospectively and talked to people who had cognitive decline, and they wanted to kind of identify what are those risk factors that contribute to cognitive decline. And so in this graph, you'll see this gray line is really, you see this, this is like genetic risk. So that's the part that we can't control, which they attributed like a 60% of the risks. But then there are 40% of lifestyle factors that were determined to be potentially modifiable. And the information is set out into kind of early, mid, and later life. And you can see that here, the green, blue, and the purple. But you can see these percentage risks. And once again, the thought of if we can be more intentional about our lifestyle factors, the authors postulated that we might either prevent or at least delay up to 40% of the dementias. And that's a pretty robust statement, but it's something that's worth looking at. And they further defined kind of the 12 areas that were determined risk factors. And you can see that they kind of show which of those factors actually impact the pathology of the disease and which ones actually impact cognitive reserve. But once again, the goal is if these can be reduced, what could we do? I mean, the article, posture, it says it might prevent, potentially. This is something we need to verify. But what we, some of the findings that the article said is, that means we need to be ambitious about prevention and that it's never too late to start. So what are those things that we can do that can help our brain function at its highest level is kind of what they're trying to get at. But one final study before we get into the different brain health recommendations and what they mean is a study called the Finger Study. And this was done in Finland, and it was a multi-domain study, and they really wanted to look at lifestyle interventions where they compared just regular advice that a person might get when they went to their doctor with this multi-domain approach. And they actually recruited over 1,200 participants, and they focused on recruiting individuals who were in the at-risk population. So these were individuals who were kind of average in terms of their the testing that they did, or a little below average, but they did not have any significant cognitive impairment. So they really did focus on at-risk people, but they were randomized into one of these groups, either the control group or the multi-domain intervention. And the slide will kind of lay out what areas they focused on, but basically that was nutritional counseling. They did physical activity, cognitive training, as well as managing medical numbers such as diabetes. And as you can see on that scale, the study lasted for 24 months. And then they compared the two groups. And so what the study found, so you can see that, so NPV just means their neuropsych test battery is what that NTV means. But here are the areas that they tested. And then on the graphs, the red line shows the intervention group and the blue line shows the control group on these areas. And you can see that there was a positive effect from being in that intervention group. And even though the effect size are not large, what the study showed that even those small effects at that individual level can actually have an exponential effect at the public health level. So this is a study that actually was kind of replicated in the United States. They actually launched in 2020, so they had to pivot and make some changes with COVID. But the study in the United States is called the Pointer Study. And they are hoping to have the findings ready to report, I think, in 2025. So it will be interesting to see how the study with some other changes, you know, what additional information they found. But the key is there does seem to be potential in terms of, so once again, this study had people who already, you know, had a cognitive decline or were at risk for cognitive decline, and they showed benefits from this multi-domain approach. And 25 years ago, when you know, a lot of this brain health focus was really just starting, we really didn't have many recommendations beyond things like do a crossword puzzle or learn a language or don't hurt your brain because you can't repair it. So I think it's very exciting, and not only are we aware of a multitude of ways that we can enhance our brain function, but also there are so many really novel research studies that are happening that are just really adding to the data that we have. And so this graphic is really just kind of a summary of different things that we can do, and we'll kind of go into many of these in more depth. But I just want you to think about, what is your brain health plan? Do you have a brain health plan? Do you know where you would start? And the goal is really not to make huge changes, because we want to make small changes that you can be consistent with over time. So it's choosing just one or two things. So as we go through these areas, I want you to be giving that some thought, but also to keep in mind that our approach in any kind of brain training we do, and especially with this focus on brain health, is it's important to be strategic, because you can't make multiple changes all at once. So you might give thought to, like, what's going to be the most strategic thing, the thing that I feel is most needful or will yield the biggest benefit. But to be realistic, so it's choosing something you can do and that you will do. That consistency is important, and also flexibility. So if something changes, it's like, you know, just be able to make a modification and not worry about it, to not feel you have to do something perfectly. But this is really part of a holistic approach, because certainly traditional medicine is important, because medicine can do so much in terms of helping manage medical numbers and other health issues. But this is just kind of this additive component where what can we do from a lifestyle standpoint that could further enhance the benefits that we may be getting from medicine. So let's start with some of these brain health recommendations. And the first on the list is really controlling medical numbers, because everyone has a different health profile, and many challenges that people have, or many diagnoses, can be treated with medication, and that is great. So if you know what you need to do there, then it's really important to follow that protocol. But I think we also know that for many of these things that we typically depend on medication, there are some lifestyle changes that we can make. So here we're kind of going back what we talked about in the growth mindset. So even though you may be managing medical numbers well, one way to have that growth mindset and to think maybe differently about that is to really consider what lifestyle changes you could make that could further benefit yourself physically. So certainly working with your doctor with those things. But, you know, oftentimes we hear about people who maybe are diabetic and they're able to make changes in their diet and exercise and either reduce or get off medication. That's not true for everyone, but what about that mindset of what can I do to make choices that can enhance whatever medical numbers you may be trying to manage. Another area that gets a lot of attention is diet. And people have different impressions of what a balanced diet is. There's so many diets out there these days. But I think there is some agreement in terms of those things that are so important in terms of brain health. And many of you may have heard of the Mediterranean diet or even the Mind diet, but there are diets that have been researched in terms of their impact on the brain. And there is data that shows that what we eat matters. And a big part of that is due to things like micronutrients, kind of giving our body those nutrients that it needs to produce chemicals, to function properly, to repair. And that's not only true for just our body as a whole, but also our brain. And so the focus on eating, you know, a rainbow of colors and vegetables and kind of whole foods is very important, but also just knowing that the fiber is important for the gut, because that's feeding organisms there and that impact bodily systems. So just being attentive to what we're eating, and if we need more information, kind of that getting off the status quo, that growth mindset would be, you know, how can I get more information? So maybe it's meeting with a dietitian or having a conversation with your doctor, just to say, are there steps that I could take to be more proactive in terms of supporting my overall health? Physical exercise. This is one that's also on the top of many people's minds, but physical exercise helps so many things. It benefits our medical numbers, so our overall health. It can benefit kind of our emotional balance, so feelings of anxiety and depression. Studies have shown that exercise can actually improve memory function. And I will kind of give another study here. There's a study by Art Kramer who did a study with adults who were typically sedentary, and they got on a walking program. So it wasn't anything big. It was walking, I think maybe 45 minutes at a time. And they actually showed increases in their cognitive performance on testing, and particularly memory. Exercise impacts energy level and also sleep. But, you know, kind of expanding that, we're learning more about the importance of strength training, and that adds to balance and adds to so many things. So making physical exercise a priority is huge. And it's not just physical. I mean, it's not just running or walking, or in this picture playing golf. You can do so many different things. You can dance, you can just be active, just being more active than normal. So research has shown that even a 10-minute walk is something that's going to be beneficial. So I think most people have this on their radar, but certainly it impacts our physical health, but it also impacts our brain health. Cognitive engagement. This applies to so many realms. It's like when people are working, there's these periods where there's lots of learning and maybe lots of stress. But as we retire, things change in terms of the things we do for cognitive engagement. But there are so many things that engage the brain. I love this picture because it's, teaching a grandchild how to make cookies. It's mentoring someone. It's organizing an event. It's writing. Maybe if you have a toast to make at a wedding, it's giving thought to what that toast contains, so that's meaningful. We can be very creative in what cognitive engagement is, but it is important to continue to use the brain in ways that we challenge it. And so in retirement, we get to be creative with what that looks like. But cognitive engagement is very important for the brain, not only in terms of kind of accessing those memories or those connections that are already there, but continuing to learn new things so that we can create new connections and potentially build more resilience. Sleep. This is an area that's getting a lot of attention these days. And if you think back to the risk factors that were on some of the earlier research articles I talked about, sleep did not make the list, but I think it may be because it's hard for people to think about retrospectively. But sleep is very important for brain function. When we sleep, that's not only when the brain is repairing, but that's when it's doing its house cleaning. So getting good sleep is important. So making sleep a priority and having a routine is very important. But, it's not just about quantity, it's also about quality. And so even giving attention to the things that we can do that may be interrupting sleep, and there's something called sleep hygiene. I don't know if, I would expect some of the audience have heard of it, maybe many, but there are things that we can do that help promote sleep. One thing that's often a recommendation is getting morning sunlight, because maybe 10 to 15 minutes of sunlight in the morning can help reset the circadian rhythm. And there's kind of studies that show that can help get the sleep cycle back in sync. And sleep does get harder as we get older, but the main focus here is to create a routine and protect sleep, because it is so important for brain function. Social connection. I think sometimes we don't realize how important social connection is for the brain. And sometimes when we get stressed or things get busy, sometimes having dinner with friends or kind of getting together can sometimes go to the wayside, but sometimes that's the best thing we can do for our brain, because we know that isolation is not good. And social interactions can help keep neural circuits flexible. But it's also another way to help reduce stress and improve emotional well-being, because those social relationships are those people around us who are there when we need help, somebody that we can call on, somebody for a listening ear, as well as somebody to have a laugh with. So investing time in the people around you is so important. And even just being open to creating new relationships and seeing, how you can learn and grow in that regard as well. But it's definitely one of the pillars that comes up often when we're talking about the importance of brain health. Another area is emotional well-being. I love this picture. I just love dancing in the kitchen. And I actually did these Alzheimer's groups, and one of my participants whose husband had Alzheimer's, she said that her husband loved country and Western music. And she said that they sometimes would just turn on music and go dance on the patio. And she said, I don't know if we would have done this had he not had dementia, but she was just trying to really accentuate and lean into creating positive times. And I love just that heart of just embracing the day and embracing the moment and doing those things that give us joy and kind of contribute to that sense of connection. And, when we talk about a growth mindset and kind of getting off the status quo, with emotional well-being and with all of these that we've talked about, we can be so creative. And one of the things I talk about in my groups is creating a happiness list. It's like just starting a list of those things that you just love to do and bring joy to your life and that are meaningful and fun, and to be intentional to continue to do those kinds of activities on a daily basis, because that just those moments of fun can do so much to refresh the brain. But there's others of these factors that we've talked about that actually impact, they kind of cross over and help each other, because good sleep is important for emotional well-being. Exercise is important for emotional well-being. That support network also contributes. So there's so many things that we do that kind of just have an exponential benefit. But it's important to do those things that give meaning, but it's also important on that other side to grieve those losses, to not ignore those feelings that also come with life, but to find ways to manage them appropriately, because that's going to be important long-term. And then we're back to mindset. So this is, how much do you believe that you can impact your brain health and your brain function? And we know that science shows that your mindset plays a significant role in life's outcome, because how much you believe about the difference what you do can make is important. And so I do hope that you'll think about that growth mindset, and to be curious and think in terms of potential and possibilities, and brainstorm ideas and come up with a plan for a way to engage your brain that is something you actually look forward to doing. There's no one right answer on how to approach any of these things, but creating something that you love and enjoy can just help a person be more consistent at whatever the plan is that you make. So we're back to the rating scale that we talked about earlier on, and hopefully you have that with you, and hopefully you filled it out. But I think one thing that you'll notice is that those areas that we talked about in terms of recommendations and things that you could do that could enhance your brain health are really listed here. And you don't have to flip it, but if you did flip it, you can think about this in terms of it being a graph. And this is your own personal graph on how you rated yourself on a limited number of categories, but some very important categories. And I should have said this earlier, but CVD just stands for cardiovascular disease. So if you have risk factors like cholesterol or high blood pressure, those kinds of things. But if you look at, if you completed this and look at it, hopefully you'll have an idea of what areas are your strengths and which areas might benefit from a little more attention. And so if you're good at, say, something like social connection, well, then maintain that. That's incredible. Continue to engage as you are in that area. But you might say you want to give a little more attention to how can I be better at managing my medical risk factors. So whether that's talking to your doctor, whether that's meeting with a dietitian, whether that's getting a trainer, it's kind of being, what are the things that I can do to kind of add to making this more beneficial? But kind of back to the things that we talked about in making your brain health plan is to be strategic. You can't to try to do everything on this graph, new things to add to your current rhythm. It would be hard to maintain. So be strategic. Really think about where could you make the most difference and what could that look like? And then, so be realistic. How are you going to get started? What does that look like? And then be consistent at your plan. And if you can measure it, if there's a way to kind of measure those kinds of changes, that can be encouraging as well. But to be flexible. So if things change, to be willing to be flexible and do something else to change your plan. And at the center, we have really a worldwide program. We're in every state in the nation and in many countries. But one of the things that this research is showing that as we look at what we call our brain health index, what we feel are really key factors for brain health, we've kind of drilled down to kind of categorize all these numerous recommendations we've made. They kind of fall into 4 categories, and that's the social connection, the emotional well-being, clarity, and then overall health. And the reason I put this chart in here is just to start a list and remind us that there are many things that you can do to impact any of these areas. And some of them overlap. But with social connection, that could be your family engagements, it could be volunteering, it could be faith-based activities. There's so many things that you can do to engage your brain. So be creative in terms of just kind of targeting some of those things that are going to be meaningful to you, knowing that life just comes up and presents its own opportunities as well. But you see some recommendations for emotional well-being and also clarity, and once again with sleep and many other of these factors, they have multiple benefits. But then certainly looking at overall health. There's some things that we know are just kind of pillars that we need to give attention to in terms of physical exercise, nutrition, and other kind of lifestyle pieces. But we hope that, or I hope that you will be thinking and targeting something that you can do that would help promote your brain health. And hopefully that chart will be a help in doing that. But I also wanted to make you aware of really kind of one of our premier studies that we're doing now. And this is for people with a recent diagnosis of Alzheimer's or other dementia. And this is what the study is called Brain Health and Alzheimer's. And this is our first foray into an online training. We've done many trainings in person, but just as these brain health strategies, what we've talked about, are important for any healthy ager, they're very important when people have a diagnosis of Alzheimer's, and also for their spouse or their care partner, if that's another family member. Because if you think about it, all of these things we talked about, if that social connection, if people are feeling more isolated, if they're not exercising, if their cognitive engagement is changing, that's going to affect their brain. And, kind of back to the studies I talked about earlier, we know that incorporating those rhythms into life can actually help people do better. So we're not removing challenge points, but we are trying to mitigate them. But this study is available to anyone with an internet access. Once again, the focus is on brain health for both the person with the diagnosis and the caregiver. When we're online, there's videos that they watch, and then there's separate group discussion with peers. So people with the diagnosis with others with a similar diagnosis and caregivers in their own group. And we try to give actionable steps. But there are a few ways if you're interested. You can go to our website, which I have there at centerforbrainhealth.org, and search Alzheimer's study, and it'll come up and you can read a little more about it, access a flyer, and there's a link there. I also have a scan code there if you would prefer to scan that can get you information as well. But we would invite your participation in that study if you're interested. And yeah, so that kind of wraps up my presentation. So I will turn it back over to Jennifer.
Thank you so much, Audette. This is incredibly helpful information. I am someone who commutes and uses social media, and sometimes I find myself caught up in it and not doing other things. So it's really eye-opening to have this information just as a constant reminder of things you could be doing. instead of doing that. So we really appreciate that. So just before we get to questions, and feel free to type more questions into the Q&A box on your screen if you have them. But we do have an online workshop coming up called Combating Stereotypes at Any Age, a diversity, equity, and inclusion workshop. And that's taking place on Wednesday, June 19th from 1 to 2 p.m. And it's presented by Jermaine Moore with the Mars Hill Group. You can either go to our website here, or you can scan the QR code to register. So we would love to have you join us for that. And now we will go on to some questions. Let's see. So our first question is, will we receive a copy of this after today? I think we are sending out a recording of this. This was recorded. So yes, you should receive. If you do not, please contact your sales counselor. What happens when one is diagnosed with Alzheimer's and goes into memory care?
So that's a pretty broad question. And probably since you deal with that more, so I deal more with people with an early stage diagnosis. And I would say that what happens, any kind of facility is going to have their plan in terms of how they care for that. And so in terms of the training of the staff, what programming they have, kind of their philosophy of care. I mean, those are the things that I would think about considering when you're trying to place someone. I don't know, Jen, if you have kind of a more specific, I'll even let you add to that answer, because that's kind of closer to your wheelhouse.
Yeah, well, I know that our memory support wing is very focused one-on-one, a lot of one-on-one attention, and often based on the residents' interests. What did they want to do? Not just joining a group activity, but what is their interest? Are they painters? Are they readers? Do they like to work out physically? And sort of their past history, and all of that is taken into consideration. And of course, the staff are trained in more depth with Alzheimer's, dementia training. The activities might be a little bit shorter than you would find for shorter attention spans. So they're usually smaller, more family type settings, like the small house model, for example. That's what I would say. I typically bring people into independent living who then progress or may progress through the care system. But I think that has a lot to do with it, is based on personal interests and just more hands-on care by trained individuals who specialize in that.
I love that expansion, because it kind of touches on some things that are so important in early stages as well. And that's your life, your life engagement. What did you love in life? You're going to love that all along. So knowing a person individually is so important. And I love that you touched on the environmental aspect of it, because less is more. So it's like smaller groups, slower pace, being aware of ambient noise that can be so distracting. And so facilities that are educated about dementia and kind of respond to those things, it's very helpful. Yeah.
Right. We have another question. Do Zoom meetings with friends count as a social engagement?
I mean, I would say most people prefer in person, but I would say when there's some people that you can't see, that does open more doors for engagement. And so that's certainly important, because that emotional connection and that consistency and seeing someone's face is so helpful. I haven't seen any research that kind of gives any specific data, but I do have an ongoing group with dementia that I meet with twice a month, and they've been meeting for a number of years. And, they still prefer in person, at least occasionally. But some of them, if we met in person all the time, they couldn't come because of maybe a spouse is working, or, just the distance, even if the spouse took off, there's just complications. And so in some ways, it does open more doors, and that's incredible. But with the study that I mentioned, the Brain Health and Alzheimer's study, that's one of the things we're going to be interested in learning is what impact can an online group have in terms of things like emotional well-being, that feeling of social connection. Can we still help at least give people the tools? I mean, part of that is we'll be able to measure what the impact of the online group has, but we're also measuring kind of what happens just in general based on the content that we talk about. But yeah, I always vote for in-person over online, but I think online has opened up some avenues that we hadn't maybe considered before.
Right. I know I've been Zooming with my college friends ever since COVID. And that's something we hadn't done previously. We hadn't gotten together. We hadn't done anything. So that's a whole new fun social experience.
Yeah.
We had a question before this event started in advance, actually, about reading. Is it important to read a book cover to cover? Are simple articles or short stories, do those make a difference with an entire magazine? Things like that. How important is reading?
Yeah, I mean, reading is a great cognitive activity. I mean, it engages so many of the senses, but I would say kind of the philosophy we kind of have here at the center and what we encourage people to do is to be sure that you're processing what you're reading. And so you can have a short article that can be very thought-provoking. So it may be just pausing and saying, what is it that I want to remember from this article? Or what can I apply to my own life? Or how would I, tell somebody about this article, or even something that you watch on TV or a book? How can I maybe summarize it in a way that communicates the bigger message, and that would kind of make someone interested in maybe taking a second look? So that process takes more cognitive engagement. And I think one thing that social media has done to some degree is it makes us graze a lot of information. We just kind of look at it and go to the next thing, and we're just really not engaging our brain at the same level as if we really slow down and read something that's going to take thought. So I think it's less about what you're reading, although that does matter because we want something that's going to be interesting and teach you something, and but have something to process. But I would just encourage people to take time to just contemplate, and actually maybe if it's very interesting or someone else's, have someone else read the book and then you discuss it together, finding ways to make that information meaningful to life.
It's great. Another question, how does having an animal or pet in your life affect your brain health?
Well, I am not an expert in this area, but I will just share what I think most of us know. And that is like it can help emotional well-being because they can be very calming. They're so accepting. They really do provide company and affection. And there are so many animal lovers in my building. It's just incredible. But they do have a benefit. And I am not an expert in that, but I think that the impact for those people who love animals, I mean, the bond can be real. And so, and I know in Alzheimer's, that can be a connection that can last a long time. I mean, with kids and with animals, because that interaction, there's no words. It's like, it's just emotion, and it's just in the moment. And I think kind of that, I mean, animals aren't always no stress, but it's such an accepting relationship. And I think that's an incredible benefit to everyone. And they get you out to exercise. I have friends that it's like, they exercise a lot more because they have like a dog to go walk. So
right.
there can be that added benefit as well.
That's right. Are there books that effectively lay out what the speaker is presenting?
Very good question. So the research article I started with has that. It's like for our Alzheimer's study, like brain health and Alzheimer's, I wrote a book called I Can Still Laugh, Stories of Inspiration and Hope from People with Alzheimer's. So it's more of a book from the families kind of telling their journey, but it kind of incorporates some of this strength-based approach. Kind of more broadly speaking, kind of on the healthy aging side, our chief director, Dr. Sandra Chapman, wrote a book called Make Your Brain Smarter, which covers some strategies that really, like strategies to help people maybe do what they're already doing differently to make it more brain healthy. And it's more of a strategy-based approach that you can apply to how to be creative and have that growth mindset, to think innovatively. It's about getting the big picture of information you read. It's about being strategic. A lot of the concepts that I spoke about around the lifestyle strategies are covered in that book. Make Your Brain Smarter by Dr. Sandra Chapman.
Thank you so much. Our next question is, I take melatonin to sleep. Is taking this counterproductive to brain health?
I've heard, so I'm not a doctor, and this is not my area, but I know that there's our Jane Whittington, who is a doctor that works here at the center. She takes half a melatonin, and she has been trained in functional medicine, and so from her perspective, it aids her sleep, and so she benefits from that. The other side of it, I've heard that it can also be disruptive to sleep. So it may, that's something to kind of be aware of on your own, but also be like with Dr. Whittington, she said she lessened her dosage and did better, because I know sometimes being aware of those sleep aids, depending on when you take it, it can make you drowsy the next day. But if it can maybe disrupt the quality of sleep, but I don't know how broadly those studies, if there's variability in people in that.
Okay.
I can't speak to that.
Our next question is there any research that suggests intergenerational social interaction or living circumstances affects brain health?
So certainly, I love intergenerational interactions because, to me, that communicates a tribe in many respects, not always, but I don't know any research to these, but I would say a strong social network that is diverse is a positive thing, because it brings in different ideas, different energy levels, so many levels of creativity. I think that can be strong. So I would say in general, that's a positive thing. What was the second part of the question?
Well, it looks like we removed the question, and I don't know. I don't remember.
That makes me feel better.
Oh gosh, there's a question. Do the memory enhancement over-the-counter meds like Prevagen or 20X, is there a deficient mineral or vitamin we should be taking to keep the brain healthy?
That's an excellent question that I cannot answer, but I would say that would be a great question to write down and ask your doctor or your pharmacist, or to kind of, this would be an opportunity to kind of explore on your own and see what you can learn and discover. And because the more knowledge you have, the more you're able to navigate that question. And so it's a great illustration of an opportunity to turn a question into a brain challenge, and kind of that hey, I'm going to be curious about. I love that you're curious about it. It's a great question. So to see where that takes you. I wish I could answer that, but I do not know.
Lastly, are there video games, different kinds of games or video aids, things like that are available for the aging population to do, or for retirement communities to offer their residents?
Well, there are a number of opportunities out there. Like I know Brain HQ has had some research done in terms of its impact. Its impact and has a positive impact in terms of things like processing speed and memory. And it's for people who enjoy that. I mean, I think those things are good to try. There are many things out there. I'm not as versed in all of them and so to say which ones are best. But certainly finding things that you enjoy, but also not discounting, because sometimes the ability for any games to translate to daily life, you may be better on the game, and sometimes it does transfer. And I know with Brain HQ, things like processing speed, it has, but we really believe that one of the important ways to change your brain is to consider how you can do what you're already doing and be more efficient in what you're doing. So if you're reading, processing that information, if you're feeling stressed, to say, what are some things I can do in my environment that can reduce stress? Maybe that's reducing clutter. Maybe that's, going to a counselor and learning how to kind of handle a difficult relationship. Maybe that's starting to exercise. So it's really about applying your cognitive capital, that brain that you have to solve problems, and say, what do I want to change in my life? What's something that I can do to make it more brain healthy, and start there, because then you have that added benefit of it's something that's in your rhythm of life on a consistent basis. And so there may be more practice and it's more real life. So that's what, nothing against those online games. I know a lot of people play them, but I would really want to emphasize really trying to figure out how to make the rhythms of your life more brain healthy.
Thank you. I think as far as community living is concerned, some communities have special games like that or utilize special apps or different games. Some don't. But I've been in this setting for 20 years, and I've seen people who were aging at home and life was getting smaller, and they moved into community like ours, and life started getting much bigger, and they were moving more, eating better. But really the engagement piece, they were, even if it's just someone smiling in the hallway, if they weren't engaged previously, they become so much healthier. And 2 months after a move-in, family will come from out of state and say, oh my gosh, what have you done with my mother? She looks fantastic,
Yeah.
and it's almost like a whole new person, or the person she used to be. And that's
Yeah.
community. That's,
It is community and stimulation. And it reminds me of something that I'd love to share. So Dr. Ian Robertson is associated with our center. And one of the things that he talks about is our brain as a neuropharmacy, in terms of what we do impacts the chemicals of our brain. So if we're exposed to things that are engaging, somebody even just smiling, like you said, I love that. Some of it's just the simple things, a change of scenery, something new, more places to explore, that can just help our brain just kind of produce chemicals that kind of make us feel good. And then because if we're too isolated and life has gotten too small, I mean, yes, moving into a community can be an incredible blessing and gift. So, yeah.
That's right. Well, thank you so much for your help today, for your presentation. We really appreciate your knowledge and expertise and willingness to join us. And thank you to all the presenters out there for joining us today as well. If you do not receive a copy of this, we'll be happy to send you a recording. And Audette, thanks again.
Thank you. I enjoyed it.
All righty. Bye-bye, everyone.